So there was a headline that came out about a week ago, and I'm interested in seniors issues because part of our group, we own Canada's largest seniors life lease community in Hamilton, in Ontario, and it's a very interesting and very sort of community-oriented way to provide housing slightly more affordably for the seniors market. But a lot of the narrative regarding affordability tends to be, well, all the baby boomers have all this real estate equity, and the millennials and Gen Z are kind of screwed. And there's a lot of truth to it, but there's actually a lot of value in this particular headline. So this is about a lady in Toronto. She has been working since the age of 15, but she became homeless for a period of time in Toronto recently until a nonprofit charity social services agency essentially rescued her from the home because of affordability is impacting everyone. And I think the point of this headline, it highlights the fact that the division is not necessarily between generational cohorts. It's not sort of the baby boomers against the millennials or the Gen Z. Really, the big division in our society today is between homeowners and people who are not homeowners. And that's a fundamental problem. So I am a first-generation immigrant. I moved, my family, I was a baby pretty much, but my family moved here from Singapore in the mid-70s. And the reason we came to Canada at that time was Canada was really the land of milk and honey. In the mid-70s, Canadian per capita income was number 3 in the world. It was after Switzerland, the United States, and Canada in terms of large countries. Today, that has eroded greatly. Depending on the particular year or and foreign exchange rates, we sort of range between number 14 to 20 something in terms of per capita income. And not that per capita income is the end all and be all of sort of a social success. It's not the only measure of successful society, but it is a very important measure. And my thesis is that because we have not addressed housing, we've allowed the housing issue to create an existential problem for our society. Because too many people, there's too much capital and too many people are struggling just to keep the lights on, so to speak. So when you have that much capital and that much human capital and attention spent on just trying to keep a roof over your head, all those dollars and all that human capital and energy and creativity and ability is not going into things like healthcare. It's not going into things like curing cancer. It's not going into things like education. And it's not going into investments in infrastructure. And so the issue is not, the division is not between generational cohorts. It's not us against them. It's we collectively as a society have not done housing right. The good news is there are other societies in other countries that have solved housing. And they've solved housing in circumstances that are far more challenging than what we face in Canada. So I do think there's a good news story. And one thing I'm glad to see with all these headlines about housing. I've been actually actively working on housing policy with one of the smartest people I know, okay, in this country for the last approaching 3 years. And Victoria made a comment that we have been and do get an opportunity to speak to policymakers and senior politicians who actually are decision makers at a very, very senior level. And I sense that it's because everybody recognizes as a society we face an existential issue, there is greater willingness to sort of transcend political division and differences in ideology to adopt an all-hands-on-deck approach to solve this issue, and it is solvable. I don't know if I have a chance to talk about some examples actually in Canada that we have a precedent of solving our housing problems that in the post-World War II period. And I'll talk about that later, but that's all I wanted to say about this headline.